Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnett Bain. Good moment, everyone.
Good moment. To start the show, I want to send out our gratitude to our sponsor, the folks at Hierophant Publishing, Hampton Roads Publishing, and Insight Events USA. They sponsor this show, make it possible, and we want to say thank you to them.
Thank you.
I did.
Thank you. It's an amazing day. We have clouds here in Southern California.
Fluffy clouds.
Fluffy clouds with qualities, gray outlines and white fluffiness and textures and contrasts. We don't get that often. Yeah. So it just feels so magical, magical. And, we start every show with a ritual cup of coffee or tea or something. And we were sitting earlier, and it struck me how enchanted everything is. How enchanted, and how every single molecule of the world is freighted with meaning, with personal meaning. And
if you're attuned to it.
If you are attuned to it.
Yeah.
If you are attuned to it. Yeah. So at tea, I shared with Freeman, listeners, you don't look closely at your radio in the car.
It's tea for you, it's coffee for me.
It is tea for me.
Let's be clear. I'm the coffee guy.
So I shared this gorgeous photograph of my daughter, now 27 years old, in this ecstatic reverie with a horse. Yeah. And there's a backstory to it. She's works as a counselor for teens and young people in rehabilitation and recovery, and she is adding to her considerable toolkit of resources equine therapy. So she's having this love affair with this gigantic horse, and as we looked at this picture, it's so clear to me the joy and the aliveness that is there, and it is the far side. And it is very much tied to service, and it's the far side of a lifelong relationship with the pain. She was an adoptee, and from the beginning, as far back as I can remember, there was always this longing and unfulfilled desire to respond to this feeling of original abandonment by her birth mom. And so hers has been a lifelong journey to repair that, to deal with that. And so interesting that her life now is really about this ecstasy, the joy that comes out of being aligned with the healing of that, simultaneously with the delivery of comfort to others. So whether it's these kids in rehab, she also does groups, weekly groups for adopted kids and kids in foster families, and there is an ability to read the signs when you are attuned, and that attunement is very much related to calibrating to our life purpose.
I like the word soul path.
To our soul path. I like that too. Yeah.
Just that there's a path that wants to unfold through us, that wants to appear in front of us when we can attune to it.
Yes.
Right? Because I think so much, at least of my life, is following in this, what you've called hand-me-down perspective of what it means to be successful, of how to win, how to be safe, how to gain approval, and the moments where I've colored outside the lines, for whatever reason, are exhilarating. And it's interesting because part of the construct right, is an acuteness of the pain. My own version, right?
It's an intimacy with it. You need to be able to have the body and the fortitude to get close and tender with what hurts.
Yeah, and it's a cutting through of this kind of scripted storyline, if you will. And that's where my personal, juice comes from. For me, and I've said this many times in the show, it was this need to express myself that wasn't available in my family of origin, right? And
so there is the key.
There is.
And what better transition could we possibly have? Did you script that, my friend? Did you plan that?
It's always divinely scripted. We're just wandering and following.
Show up and read the signs. So, yes, we are absolutely delighted to have my friend Lisa Miller today with us on Cutting Edge Consciousness. Lisa is professor of psychology and education, director of the clinical psychology program at Columbia University Teachers College, and founder of the Spirituality Mind Body Institute there, which is, by the way, the first do you like my cracking voice? I have a cold. Do you like that?
Nice.
Yeah, I feel like I'm about an 11-year-old girl. First Ivy League graduate program in spirituality, psychology in the land.
Wow.
Very cool. Dr. Miller is the author of The Spiritual Child. Nice segue. The new science of parenting for health and lifelong thriving. And we are delighted and honored to have her with us today on the program. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for including me.
Well, we sort of teed up a lot for you. It's very clear. This is where I know I was heading, and then Freeman can speak for himself because it's more sanitary. To provide a space, I mean, one of the most exalted roles of parenting is to create the container wherein the child can develop, both grow and develop. I think they're different things, in such a way as they can become attuned to their own, as you put it, Freeman, soul path. And for the parent to be able to hold that space without defining it too rigorously, so that the child thinks it's incumbent upon him or her to become a little mini-me. That's a really challenging dance.
That's a huge.
So, what have you to say about that? Now we can kick back.
You put that very beautifully. I mean, I fully agree. I think the child is born with their own, what James Hillman called the soul's code, that we have our own inherent path, our own inherent calling. And as a parent, the ultimate challenge is to trust our children in finding their spiritual path. I think about the wonderful story of the sacrifice of Isaac, right? And really what I take that story to mean is that we hand our kids over in faith and trust of the universe, because we can't control much, and in fact we can control very little. And it's really up to this great force in us and through us to help guide every one of us, including our kids. The equipment that we can help build, though, quite deliberately and with great focus as parents, is equipping our children to know themselves as spiritual beings and to lean into life as a spiritual event. And we have a great deal pointing in other directions in our sort of mainstream culture that measures kids on performance, that tells kids you're as terrific as your successes and you're as visible as your fame. But really, life is a spiritual event, and that is more real, it's more sure, and it's far more abundant. And kids get that if we start, as parents, when they're very young, talking that way.
Well, and ourselves being that way. Because one of the things that for me is important is to navigate the kind of murky water of the conditioning, right? So I'm not taking my kids and running off to an ashram. Not to diminish that. I mean, it's fine. I think, there are people who say, I want to create this, alternative avenue. Though knowing some people who have those alternative avenues, I recognize it comes with all of its own conditioning. So my sense is you don't escape some of the conditioning. We as parents don't escape our own projections onto our kids. That comes along too. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that to raise a child as a spiritual agent in civilian clothes is a tremendous gift to our children, that they can join the world and, go to the very same school on the very same block and be on the very same teams as the kid next door, but all the while knowing themselves as sacred, as spiritually worthy and intimate, and knowing from our upbringing as parents that there is a deeper mission and purpose to life than, the outcome and winning and the sort of world of measurement. I think that, being a plainclothes spiritual civilian.
I love that. So that's fantastic. No white robes or pink robes or anything like that.
Undercover.
And that's maybe the timeless challenge, right, is to stay embodied and with being embodied in need and having to pay the rent and wanting companionship, but doing it in a spiritual way. And that's, I think, our second greatest opportunity as parents is to integrate the spiritual core with all else. To integrate perhaps with our teens their desire to connect with other people, to have a boyfriend or girlfriend and be sexually intimate. All the stuff that happens and kids discover can be explored and realized through a spiritual core. And that's a part of life that may be our highest and most important calling as parents. I've heard clients, I've heard patients say, I was depressed for 15 years. I was addicted to pornography for 15 years. I really struggled in my life for a long time. And all the while, all I ever wanted anyone to say was, hey, what does your higher self, what does your spiritual heart say about your sexuality? What does your spiritual heart say about your desire to merge and connect? If we don't have that conversation, we are disintegrating kids, and disintegration, we know, is unhealth.
Wow, that's there's so much that you've said. There's so much I want to respond to. That's so provocative. If I had heard as a young man messages from my parents, and not just simply in a conversation, as in take my advice, I'm not using it, but if I had heard a message from my parents that they were mature enough to live into themselves, messages like, I give you permission to have a sexual life with a partner of your choice and not lose me, not lose my love. I value you. I love you for, not for what you do, but for who you are. If I had heard that, and if it was lived in, if my parents had lived that and embodied it sufficiently that I could hear it and believe it and take it in and see that heart set modeled persistently and consistently day after day, life would have been very different. I don't know what might...
And the fact that it was the bumpy ride it was is yours, you chose it, and...
all that is true.
And your daughter has permission to have her sadness and her confusion and whatever else comes along with her experience in a way that perhaps you didn't.
That's true, and to be able... That's a wonderful point, too, and so I'd love you to speak, Lisa, about this idea of... the challenge that parents have to be able to create space for their children to move through the icky, sticky Velcro parts, where to allow one's child to be uncomfortable. We have all these helicopter parents that want to fit. Every time my child has an issue, I have to jump in and fix it. What is the impact of that kind of agency and overcare on our children? What does that do? Does that foster an intimacy with spirituality, or does it alienate and estrange them from it?
The parent of today, I think, is a parent rooted in fear. You know, we have our contracting economy, we have our unstable geopolitical landscape, and nothing's sure. And so, you know, fear is understandable, but teaching fear and you know, duck and cover isn't much of a way to go through life, and it's ultimately
duck and cover. I remember duck and cover.
It's not much of a way to go through life day in and day out, and it's certainly not foolproof, right? So rather than fix, you know, the failed grade or the eruption at school or even the, you know, suspension or anything that might come, I think as parents we have in these moments these golden opportunities to teach a way of leaning in to disappointment and misfortune. And it's really the leaning in. It's how we essentially approach these very rough times that is the ultimate lesson that sticks with our kids.
And it is the portal that can lead our kids toward that soul path. We both watched a very beautiful video of yours on YouTube that I recommend to all our listeners. It was speaking. You were speaking of the relationship between depression and setback and spiritual opening.
Yes. It's really the losses. It's oftentimes when we feel taken from that we're actually, that hand that feels like it's taking is pulling us and guiding us and giving us a whole new direction. You know, I think of the door that, you know, seems to have closed with the disappointment, with the loss that precipitates depression, as the very opportunity for us to turn and find a new horizon. That moment of suffering, that loss of bearing, where we lose everything we thought we wanted, where we lose everything that seemed so sure, is the death of a false sense of reality. It's the death of the false self. And when the ego dies that way, we actually live into a much brighter and bigger world. That's not something elusive to a teen. That's something a teen can understand.
Big time.
A teen understands being rejected by the first girlfriend or boyfriend they ever loved. A teen understands,
or not being picked for first for a team, or being left out for a party. But
moments,
for a parent to be aware of that and to hold, be a container for allowing that child to have an intimate relationship with their feelings, is to train, is to guide and to instruct a child into a relationship with the opportunity states for all kinds of golden moments on the other side.
We need to take a quick break.
Oh, no.
So speaking of the other side, on the other side of this break, when we come back, we will delve more into this. So stay with us.
Let's sell some stuff. We'll be right back.
Here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome back. We're here with Professor Lisa Miller, author of the new book, The Spiritual Child. And we're deep into a conversation. Let's re-up. Freeman, you're bouncing in your seat. What is that? I love to see that kind of energetic bouncing going on.
What's exciting to me about this conversation, first of all, Lisa, I love the lean-in language. So often, pointing back to what Barnett was saying about the inclination of a parent to want to rescue their kids and save them and intervene so they have no sadness and no pain in their lives is not only impossible, but it's not helpful. The idea that, you know, pain is part of life, the ability to respond to the pain and actually move into it in a way where a deeper sense of who we are is revealed. That's what I'm hearing in the conversation so far.
And I think that depth of wisdom can be narrated to our kids. A 14-year-old, an 18-year-old, maybe even a 10-year-old can understand that. And in the most transparent way, we can say, okay, this hurts. What's the spiritual opportunity here?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think modeling a way of responding when things are challenging is the way to go, and it isn't. It's messy. It's okay to be messy. I mean, again, I've said this on the show before, that my sense that my biggest triumph with our now adult son, we have 2 smaller children as well, but was how we admitted to not knowing what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And there was a way that we drew Josh into the conversation about how we navigate the challenges versus, just the knee-jerk reaction of being my father and, laying down the law. And I don't want to do that. That's not interesting to me. And coming out of my relationship with my father, the deep wound is this sense of, did he ever have any confusion? Because his story is he didn't, just as a sort of personality. Now, of course, I know he did, but that wasn't revealed to me. Mm. So where he robbed me of the deeper opportunity to not know was in modeling not knowing, right? And he didn't do that. He was the knowing guy.
Yeah, that's very magnificent. So you sat with uncertainty. Here, ultimate stakes are on the line, right? A choice for your child, your intense love for your child. And you showed him, you let him in to your world of quest. And if we can teach kids quest, if we can teach kids we're on a seek and find, then everything is a green light.
And allowing them the dignity of their choices. Josh made a very dramatic decision that at a surface level, he was 18, at surface level was a horrible idea. But my wife and I knew enough not to meddle and to let him make that choice. And that's huge, because in the past, or at least in my growing up, there's no way I would have been allowed to make that choice. And we let him make the choice.
Yeah, I think that we can also let them deep into ourselves, into our decision-making process, and we can have a total window. And so if that is, I am going to meditate, I am going to pray, I am going to go into nature and see what comes. Not everything is a logical deduction, short list, long list, what wins the day type analysis. There's inspiration in our lives, and I think as parents, our transparency into our own spiritual process is the greatest gift to our kids we can give them.
That's beautifully said. Because when I hear you say that, what occurs to me is that it's that kind of modeling that that instills a sort of resilience in us. The idea that when we're trained, that there are always a solution, there's always a strategy, we can outthink life. The reality is we cannot outthink life, and so we are ill-equipped for resilience when things blow us back. Our parents are our stand-ins for God. And how we show up as parents, how we were shown up for by parents, creates the environment. You had a father who listened deeply to you. You write in your book about the relationship you had with your father and his vulnerability, his willingness to express his uncertainty about things and to engage you as a peer, not as somebody with equal maturity, but equity in life. Yeah. Not equality in experience, but equity in experience. And he engaged you as a peer and spoke with you, shared with you openly about his confusions and his uncertainties and his questings and his wonder.
Yes, and that's very moving. In The Spiritual Child, I write about my father, who was an artist. My father is an artist. He's in the theater. And he taught me foremost that the symbolic world is real. He didn't do a big essay.
I love your father.
Yeah, he's a beautiful soul, and I think you would all like each other very much, artists like you gentlemen. And he, on the night that his mother died, he had a dream. There he was in his mid-40s. I was not yet 10. And that morning he woke up, and it was perhaps one of the most powerful and memorable moments of my life. He sat down on the living room carpet with me, and he told me the dream of walking down the Boyhood Avenue My parents grew up in the Midwest. He was walking down the sidewalk in downtown Des Moines, Iowa, with his beautiful mother by his side. And although she often dressed in beautiful clothes, in this dream she wore a very everyday gray outfit. And he said, you know, there we were, side by side, the road we had walked so many times, my mother in her everyday clothes, and I took it to mean that she was my mother. She had always walked by my side, and she always will walk by my side, and I am not alone.
It's beautiful.
I have chills because it speaks archetypally to what is most deep and true in all of us, and we long to connect with what is more real, and we recognize it in the wisdom stories we share with each other, and that he would share that with you as a child is so powerful. Then you tell another story in the book, and to me these stories are kissing cousins. You talk about riding along on a subway and witnessing a grandmother with her young granddaughter. And I'd like you to speak a little more about that and share that with our audience, because it seems to me it became the seminal experience that gave rise to it turned the direction of your entire career.
It's true, and it gets right to the point that you both raised today, which is here I was, chipping away day in and day out in my lab at Columbia University, trying to understand, in one data set after the next, how spirituality might factor into all that we know about health and wellness in kids. How is it that a kid, in the same economic situation, the same educational situation, the same family configuration, might fare differently if she or he has a strong personal spirituality? And that's a question that can be answered by science, using the lens of science. But it took some looking. And, because I was obsessed with this question, I was going into work on a Sunday, standing on a hot platform at a subway stop in New York City in August. And finally, a train rolled through that was packed, but for one car. And in this one car where I marched on, there was a total evacuation to the far end of the car, because a homeless fellow was very loud, yelling at the far end of the car, offering people some of his lunch. Do you want some of my lunch? Do you want some of my lunch? And the riders weren't interested in his lunch, but really sort of had backed off and left this fellow to his own. Well, we roll around. We're going up through various stops, and at 145th Street on March, the most elegant grandmother and her granddaughter. They have little white gloves, a pillbox hat, beautiful pastel dresses, and the whole car cringes, knowing the inevitable question, do you want some of my lunch, would be lurched at this lovely couple. And when the question comes, to everyone's astonishment, they look at each other, little girl and grandma, they nod in unison, and then they march right over to the very loud, flailing homeless man and sit right down next to him, hip to hip. And this goes on then for another 10 minutes. Do you want some of my lunch? Do you want some of my lunch? And each time, the little girl looks at her grandma, they nod, and then they turn back to the homeless man and in the most gracious way say, no, thank you, sir. It didn't matter how many times he asked or how wild he got. They were unflagged. No, thank you, sir, until they finally got off. So, the question of how is it that a little girl or a little boy loaded with the same level of economic opportunity or lack of opportunity, parent or no parent, comes to have this extraordinary grace, this extraordinary composure and love, these spiritual values of regarding every soul as valuable, like that homeless man on the subway, became clear. It is the torch passed through generations. It is not spirituality as I necessarily go find it myself as a child, but it appears to be my innate spirituality as a child as fostered by a loving, guiding parent figure, in this case, a grandparent. It could be an uncle, aunt, teacher, mentor. And that moment on the subway was a living symbolic moment, as my father had taught me. It's all real. It all counts. It's all guiding. And what it said was that the greatest source of resilience in a child is not spirituality. It's spirituality as ignited and held and guided by their loving parent, by living it out through the daily lives together, as you just shared in your own beautiful stories.
What strikes me from your dad being an artist, because what you said earlier, that Barnett and I look at life through that frame of the artistic vantage point, which is many vantage points, right? It's being able to take the lens and move it to here, move it to there, or whatever, to seek out this sort of deeper real, what's more real. So I recently was a judge. I did this last year as well. It's something called Classic Slam. And what struck me last year struck me again this year, that you had kids that were going to schools where they were paying $30,000 plus a year to be there. And you had kids who were last year literally at a continuation school, but this year at schools in some of the tougher neighborhoods in Los Angeles, competing equally on this stage with a classic piece of poetry and then their own interpretation. And I was blown away again and again and again how deep and profound the insights were, and how much, the language that came out of these kids. We talked on the show before, Barnett, about battlefield poets, the kind of, fourth grade education, and yet in the midst of battle, this man was able to tap into and language something well beyond what the world would suspect was his capability, but in that grippingness of relating to life artistically, and in the juice of that, something, I'll call it genius, but I don't know what it is. It's this thing that comes out of us. So for me, art is the great equalizer. It's the place where, the symbols do become real, right? Because that's all we've got to work with. It's all symbolic because it's really just art. And in symbolizing the experience, we go deeper than just representing it as it's collectively, held or framed.
Yeah, I would say that deeper is all the way to the ultimate transcendent bedrock, the ultimate truth. And the arts have been our spiritual keeper for the past century. The sciences went cold. Certainly the healing professions went cold until very recently. It was the arts that were the keeper of spiritual life.
So, like Humpty Dumpty, we're putting it all back together again. The arts were the keeper of the keeper of the secrets. And one time, it seems that if we look back at the history, the historical story, the historical record, science and religion decided at some point to divvy up the world. You take on the unseen, and we'll deal with facts.
Right.
And the arts were the bridge between.
Beautiful.
That at this point
still are.
Well, I'm starting to. Yeah, they are. You're absolutely right. But it's so clear that artistry is being expressed across the sweep, across the board. There isn't an expression of being that is not a fulfillment of artistry, because I think that art is love's labor. Art and spirituality are the one thing. There is only ever one thing. Right. But there is an attunement to both what is mysterious and what is generous in real art.
We work with very, very poor kids. We work with homeless kids at Covenant House in New York. And we find that when we go in, talk therapy, that's okay. But when we go in and do a visualization, a spiritual visualization, we ask them to envision their higher self. We ask them to envision anyone, living or deceased, who truly has their best interest in mind. They are exceptionally capable.
Totally.
Yes. And that is a real spiritual connection through the inner life.
And going back to the very start of this conversation, the pain is a portal to something more profound. It doesn't always show up that way, right? When the collectively held story disallows it, diminishes it, makes it wrong, depression, give the kid drugs, let's not go there, then no. But when it's honored and respected and given an outlet creatively, it's soulful as heck.
And opens a whole new horizon.
For everybody.
Yeah.
Not just the person who's experiencing, witnessing, and expressing themselves artistically, but for anyone who witnesses it is then brought into a deeper relationship with a big T truth. Hey, listen, we've hit the sort of end of the segment.
No!
Yeah, it happens.
It's not true. Tell me it's not so. Tell me it's not so. Before...
Magnificent. What a fantastic discussion. Thank you.
We'll have you back, and hopefully we'll have you in studio.
Yeah, we got to get you out to LA.
We're good to have you in studio. So we want to share with our listeners, so everybody pull over to the side of the road, get out a pencil. Nobody has a pencil, right? Pull out your phones.
That's right. Voice dictation.
Where can our audience, where can they learn more about what you are doing? And of course,
I just want to promote that TED Talk. I think it's beautiful. I know you did 2 of them, but it's the one that Barnett was referring to that I thought was absolutely exceptional.
Depression and spirituality, 2 sides of one door.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the Spiritual Child just came out this week, and it is #1 family on Nielsen. So,
woohoo!
Yeah.
Okay, we're cheering here.
Think of family as a spiritual event. People are ready to see their children as spiritual awakenings.
The book is gorgeous.
The Spiritual Child.
The book is The Spiritual Child. It is gorgeous. It is beautiful. I urge you. It's my bedside go-to. It's been. I was fortunate enough to get it in galleys, folks. So you can all envy me, because I know it intimately at this point, and I urge you all to purchase it and enjoy it, and then you can write in and tell us how much you enjoyed it.
So what's the website before we let you go?
Oh, see, it's Lisa Miller, PhD, and on there's The Spiritual Child and the TED Talk, which is, integrated with science, but really a personal journey through the darkness to spiritual awakening, which, while told in my path, I think is a universal trek that we all make.
I love it. I love it. So go there. Not right now, because we're going to come back and wrap things up. So stay with us for just a minute. But then after that, go right there. Check out Lisa's work.
We're going to talk about her behind her back as soon as we dump her off
That's
the call.
That's what we do. Lisa, thank you so much for being with us today. And, of course, we look forward to having you back again.
Thank you.
And for those of you listening, we invite you to stay tuned, because we'll be right back after these messages here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain. Something that I want to bring up, because the way art acts as a conduit for me to something more real or deeper, or even something yet undiscovered, but it pricks the possibility, right? It pricks in me a sense of inspired. There's something. I want to talk about that piece that I turned you on to recently that I posted on Facebook, which was a dance piece. Intense,
so beautiful,
sensual, and even sexual in its the way it felt.
Erotic as opposed to sexual. We are constantly. I'm jumping in ahead of you, but we're constantly seeking to experience the play of exuberance and serenity simultaneously. That this alchemy of sensuousness. And it's our birthright. We look for it in all ways, and increasingly we're conditioned away from it for all kinds of reasons, and so we find it in sexuality. We find it
in the narrow ways. I think the word that you're talking about, erotic, is far more. I want
to make that distinction.
Yeah,
actually,
that's absolutely right.
That because we have lost the sense of eros in the world, we increasingly turn to sexualizing things, because at the core of it, the tiny seed of it, is is something beautiful and pure, but we don't have access to it, and so we kind of become obsessive about things like pornography and all sorts of eroticizing in the most trivial way. But when you see it expressed in a balanced way, in a healthy way, whether it is in this dance, which was such a gorgeous expression,
so amazing,
or in a, you see it in some young entrepreneurs in the way that they just create these businesses. They're like seeds that suddenly bloom, and this is an eros, a balance of our deepest creative will and action, married to our deepest experience of willingness and connection. And in between, something miraculous happens that's very, very juicy and very sensuous and very alive.
So I want to talk about what that meant to me.
Yeah.
That piece grabbed me in a way that is so important. The way that I learned sexuality was to first try to get it right. Yeah, I wanted to figure out the formula, if you will.
How to kiss like they did in the movies?
How to just get it right. Yeah. And the idea that my own sexuality could be an expression of some aspect of me, of a discovery, of a, something more core, has eluded me. In moments in my life, I have felt very connected to that, but only in glimpses, right? In falling in love and in certain other moments.
Flow states.
Yeah, flow states. But mostly the conditioning that, for me, is very adolescent. The adolescent boy who wanted to get it right, learn how to please women, learn how to, get it right, oppressed a lot of my experience. So when I see something like that, it's exciting to me that there's this deep sense of sensuality expressed artistically that I don't see expressed in any other medium in our culture, for me, in this moment. So dance is one of those rare insights.
Music?
Well, yes.
Gardening?
Well, okay, so
You've been to Yosemite or Central Park?
I'm talking very literally, about sensuality. Not to say I can't see sensuality in nature, and I got it. And music, occasionally, there's a piece of music that's heartfelt and deep and profound, but mostly not. It mostly organizes around a very narrow perception of what's possible sensually, especially as men. It's almost like music becomes a cartoon of just this really small story, right? I lost the girl, I loved her so much, or the rap of the day where I'm the big, sexual guy and I can please all these women, which is so corny and lame and brittle.
I'm going to throw out an intuition that I have now.
Yeah.
There is a building in downtown Los Angeles. It's the Disney Concert Hall.
Yeah.
The Frank Gehry structure. That every time I go by, the sensuality of it, the eros in it, the dizzying drama of it. It makes me both giddy and solemn at the same time. I've seen it from the air. I've seen it from the street. Every single time. So there is. This eros is captured in architecture from time to time, right?
It is. No,
you're smiling, so
well, I'm appreciating your point, and
we're hard pressed to identify it in the culture. It is a very rare gift, and it's very rare to actually be calibrated to appreciate it.
Look, I'm going to shoot incredibly straight. My wife and I made love the other night in a way that we haven't in a long time, and it was inspired.
That's
by
great
that
for
dance.
Our search engine optimization.
It was inspired by that dance. That dance gave me permission to explore something deeper, period. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, it's expressed in the Disney Hall. I get it. And I could go into nature and I could feel the sensuality.
So it made you alive.
it popped open a portal of possibility, and I want that. That's it. I want to feel...
Let's talk a little bit about what the possibility was. I'm curious. It popped open a portal of your own aliveness.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
And how did you experience that aliveness? I don't mean for you to... I'm not suggesting that you share the intimate details of... But what was the... how did you know that you were alive?
The piece struck me as very empowering, that the man and the woman in the piece are meeting at a level of personal, I don't want to use the authority because that's not right, personalness of expression, right? They're both just, the man is so sensual, which I really love to see. You know, the sort of chauvinism of our culture has made that...
We're going to put this video up on our Cutting Edge Consciousness Facebook page, okay? Because I know there's a bunch of people thinking, boy, we need a show and tell here. We need a visual aid.
Yeah, no, we will.
And it'll be great for your sex lives too, so guys.
Okay, so sensuality in men has, in the sort of chauvinistic culture, is sort of gay. Oh, well, that's gay. You know, there's only one sort of archetype, and it's the you know, the warrior kind of macho guy who's conquesting, and the woman is passive. In that dance piece, that woman is not passive. She's full of passion, and the man meets her, and they have this incredible connection, and I go, yeah, I want that. Because the story of men are supposed to be in charge and on top and or the woman is, but still in a chauvinistic mindset where now she's the vixen. None of that crap was going on. None of that. The woman owned her sexuality and her sensuality. The man owned his, and it was very much a beautiful dance, literally dance of energies coming together to create something powerful. I want that. Now, in nowhere else do I see that represented as eloquently and as succinctly as that specific dance piece, period.
Fantastic.
And it inspired me, and when I connected with my wife, I showed up in a different way. Yeah.
Did she see the dance as well? Not that she needed to. No. But I'm just curious.
No, and that would have been interesting had she seen it. What would have? But it didn't matter. I mean, well, maybe it would have helped. All of this. It's so funny. Organized help. Help what? What's there to help? I mean, the idea was simply that I wanted to be more sensual with my wife. I wanted to be a deeper connection, and she met me there energetically because that's where I showed up. And I think my wife longs for that. I think a lot of people long for it, and we've suppressed it down to these, again, to use your expression, the Chinese menu, the 4 options, the ways that it's cool to show up sexually. And then we have all these, you know, rappers and hip-hop artists running around promoting this small story of possibility in terms of how what it means to be cool sexually. You know, that's nonsense. That dance was deep and profound, right, for me. And I think the man in that dance was so sensual and so alive with a deep sensual eroticness, and in our culture that would be seen as gay. Right? It's not. So I want a version of sensuality in men.
It would be stereotyped only by people who operate inside of a bandwidth that is so constricted that they can only perceive and conceive of something that fits inside of their model already. So it wouldn't necessarily be labeled one thing or the other.
Well, it's okay that it's labeled gay. I mean, look, I'm not making gay wrong. That's great. And maybe gay men have a greater sense of their own sensuality than your average straight guy is allowed to in his you know, constrictive mindset. So I'm not saying it's a gay or straight issue. I think it's a deeper sense as a man.
No, I
what does it mean for me to be
so
sensual, and how does it feel out in the world? I want more of that.
I'm also very intrigued. I'm intrigued just thinking about the impact of let's personalize it. For you to embody that sense of balance of your dynamism as a man and your receptivity, your dynamism as a man expressing your masculine energy. I'm not making this gender-based, as well as the animism and the receptivity expressing your feminine energy in balance as a male.
Right.
What would took form in sex with your wife last night. It was wonderful, but and that's great. But the impact that would have on your children, who experience a father who continues to carry that balance as an abiding,
love it,
as abiding nature, not something, it comes and goes, it waxes and wanes. I understand. What does that do to those that are in your orbit? And I think it has a powerful impact, as powerful in its own way as the viewing of that video had impact on you.
And so stay tuned, folks, because we'll be
back with more on this. And
thanks.
We'll have listening. Jasmine in next week, and we'll hear this.
Right. All right. Stay tuned.
Thank you for staying with us.
Thanks.